Sup you beautiful people. Hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to a brand new episode of What If Deku Was the Ghost Rider. When he discovers that his mother is in danger of dying from an illness, Izuku does not know what to do, but a mysterious man seems to have a solution to that problem, as well as having a way to get him a quirk. Faced with the possibility of saving his family and becoming a hero, Izuku will sign a contract that will change his life forever. If you guys enjoyed this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel after watching this video. Don't forget to shower some appreciation onto the incredible author responsible for this fanfiction. The link is conveniently waiting for you in the description box down below. Before we get into it though, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. An unreal silence reigned in the street as the sunlight was fading more and more. All Might stood still with the sun behind him, his eyes wide open as his mind tried to process the words just heard. In front of him, Izuku did not look away, having already said what he wanted to say. Looking away would have seemed an action worthy of someone who only knows how to speak and not act. You do not want to become a hero, repeated All Might, thinking he hadn't heard correctly, but, seeing Izuku nod, he knew he had heard all too well. Is it because you are quirkless? Actually, I'm not quirkless, said Izuku, confusing him. True, when I was 4 years old I went to a doctor to see if I could know what my quirk was, but he told me that I belonged to that slice of people born without a quirk. On the same day I also learned about my mother's cancer. Seeing the confusion still present on All Might's face, he added, you have revealed to me your secret, albeit not voluntarily, so I'd like to return the favor somehow. It's a complicated story, would you like to hear it? Seeing the seriousness of his gaze, All Might nodded. If, despite your desire to help, you have decided not to want to become a hero, it must be one hell of a story. More than you think, thought Izuku before calling Johnny with his cell phone, warning him that he would be late and that he could have dinner without him. After the call was over, Izuku led All Might for a few minutes in the residential area, until they arrived at an old abandoned building site, where there were still several scaffolding and machinery. Izuku went to lean against an iron beam, while All Might sat down on a pile of cement bags, nodding his head. I'm all ears, kid. I would say it would be right to start from the beginning, when my mother miraculously managed to defeat the cancer, said Izuku, folding his arms over the chest. I do not know what data you were able to recover from the medical device that my mom used, but I do not think that, even if you were able to recover her body, someone would be able to create a cure. Why? Yes, many doctors and scientists are still working on the cure using all that they can, but my mom did not defeat the cancer, not alone at least. Someone healed her within a night, said Izuku, shocking the pro hero. How can you be so sure about that? Asked All Might. No quirk used to cure has ever managed to cancel the effects of cancer. When that doctor told me that I was quirkless, my mother asked me to wait outside the room because she had to speak privately with him. It was at that moment that I met a man dressed elegantly, explained Izuku, looking at the sky. I do not know why, but I told him my problem, and that I would never be able to become a hero. Imagine my surprise when he told me that not all quirks were inherited through the genetic code, but that there were several quirks that could be passed from person to person, or that some quirks could even create new quirks and transmit them. Again, All Might was shocked. Of course, he knew of the existence of the quirks that might have passed from one person to another. He himself owned one, but what shocked him was that people outside a restricted circle knew about this information. Who was this man? Do you know his name? As it may seem absurd. No, I do not know his name. I met him only 3 times in my life, and I never managed to ask him his name, said Izuku with a shrug. The first time was in that waiting room. I met him for the second time on the following day, and I explained to him about my mother, so he asked me something that even today I struggle to believe. He looked at All Might with eyes full of seriousness. He offered me a contract. A cure for my mother and a quirk for me, in exchange for my soul, even if not literally. He told me that, in due course, he would come to me to collect the favor, and that I would have to help him with something, but I do not know what. All Might seemed to guess something and said, you accepted the offer. That man had offered you what you most wanted, isn't it? As a matter of fact, yes, I signed that contract, although not in a normal way, or voluntary for that matter, nodded Izuku, looking down with sad eyes. The next day, my mother was healed. I do not know how it was possible, but she was healed, and she decided to go to the city center for some shopping. You know what happened then? The terrorist attack. Yes, as I told you, at the hospital I met Johnny, an old friend of my mother and my new guardian. said Izuku. From that day on I lived with him, slowly discovering some aspects of the quirk I had received, although I still do not know when I received it exactly. It all started when I melted something unintentionally, and from then on the situation has improved, so to speak. But then, 2 years ago, I met that man for the third time, and that's when everything went to hell. What do you mean? All Might asked, feeling the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Izuku remained silent for several seconds, his head bent with the eyes shadowed by his hair. When All Might was about to speak again, he slowly raised his head, which began to burn like the rest of his body. The blonde hero jumped on his feet, alarmed by what was happening, but when he was about to run toward the boy to help him extinguish the flames, he realized how Izuku was calm, while his clothes were not affected by the flames. In a few moments, he saw the body of Izuku being consumed by the flames except for the bones, but all the questions that were forming in his mind had only one obscure answer when, in front of him, nothing remained but a flaming skeleton. Slowly, Izuku raised a hand and placed 2 fingers between his teeth. Despite the complete absence of a throat, he managed to emit a short but strong whistle, confusing All Might. However, his confusion was short-lived when, in the distance, he heard the roar of an engine, and, to his astonishment, saw a motorbike wrapped in flames jumping over the building site wall without difficulty, landing near Izuku. At that moment, the mind of All Might, with years of experience, put all the pieces together, and the pro-hero looked at Izuku with narrowed eyes, flaming centaur. Izuku nodded slowly. Before you ask, no. It was not my intention to make myself known for those things I've done. Forgive me, kid, but it's hard to believe. It's been 2 years since your first appearance and your list of victims is not exactly short, said All Might in a serious tone of voice. Understandable, but my story is not over yet. If you can, listen to me until the end and then you can judge me, said Izuku with a calm voice, although not exactly normal. All Might looked at him for a few seconds but then sighed heavily, sitting down again. It may not seem like it, but I often let myself be controlled by emotions. This should be one of those situations, but if you have had the courage to show me your true identity, then it is only right that I listen to the end. Go ahead. My thanks, nodded Izuku before resuming. When I met that man for the third time, he somehow managed to unlock part of my power, saying that in a few years he would come to collect the favor. At that moment I felt like I was on fire. I had never felt such a strong pain, and my body started to move on its own. Without realizing it, I took a bike that started on its own, and drove to an old warehouse, where I slowly began to transform into what you see now. That was the night when Flaming Centaur killed for the first time, and yet I feel like throwing up at the thought of that night. He looked up at All Might. I had no control over my quirk. My quirk was in control, and I could not stop it. I could only remember every morning what had happened during the night, the faces of those people whom I had killed without mercy. With the passing of the months, I began to control it, but only after a year I managed to reach an acceptable level, going so far as to be able to transform at will. However, even today my quirk acts alone. When the evil at night reaches certain levels, I cannot control it. I can only hope that it will not harm innocent people, but as far as I can tell, the targets of my quirk are villains and those with souls stained with blood. All Might looked at him with sympathetic eyes. Why not ask for help after the first night? There are specialized centers for the control of one's quirk. It would not work. My quirk is too powerful and I was scared, admitted Izuku looking down. I was only 14 and had just killed a dozen people. I couldn't just go to some hero and explain what happened. I wanted to become a hero too, after all. Instead, I decided to learn how to control my quirk so I could help people, but a year ago I realized that I could never be a hero, and I gave up my dream. Why? What happened a year ago? Asked All Might with curiosity and anxiety present in the voice. Perhaps it was the voice of experience, but something told him that it was not something pleasant. A year ago. Izuku looked back at him, and All Might felt uncomfortable upon seeing the look of that inflamed skull. A year ago I almost killed a hero. Flashback. Tokyo's port, a year ago. Izuku silently drove his bike through the streets of the port area of Tokyo, blowing up the light of the different street lamps in its passage, and setting fire to the few trees present. Apparently it was a side effect of his transformation, but he did not care, not when he was transformed at least. That was one of the nights where his quirk had taken control. Its thirst for vengeance had been piqued by the presence of several villains in the area, many of whom had a soul completely black. The call too strong to resist, and Izuku could not do anything to stop his own power. Suddenly, he stopped in the middle of a road near a large warehouse, then looking at the structure in silence. Hearing some laughter inside the building, Izuku got off his bike and approached the wall, placing a hand on it. In a few moments, the entire wall was crossed by red cracks, and then collapsed to the ground. Ignoring the destruction caused, he advanced into the structure until he came to a large gate, behind which he could hear the laughter of a group of people. With a gesture similar to the previous one, he touched the metal surface, but this time he melted it instantly, scaring the people inside who, at the sight of Izuku and his flaming skull, jumped away in fear, looking for something to use as a weapon. "Who the hell are you?" shouted a man with yellow skin and the eyebrows similar to lightning's. Izuku didn't answer, merely looking at the group in front of him. 7 people, all armed with quirks and weapons of different types, including an assault rifle, probably obtained from the black market, but what most attracted his attention were the crimes reflected in their souls. Theft, fraud, murder, betrayal, rape. "Hey, I'm talking to you, freak," the same man shouted with sparks around his feet. Looking at him, Izuku took off the chain he wore around his chest, holding it with his right hand. "Well, I don't know who the hell you think you are, but you just made a big mistake." After charging both feet with electricity, the man darted forward to hit Izuku with a kick to the skull, but the power of the shot simply tilted Izuku's head to the right, leaving the others open-mouthed. "Funny," said Izuku looking back at the man who was now walking backwards. "I was gonna say the same thing." Before the man could react, Izuku threw his chain around his chest like a snake, and, after a violent jerk from Izuku, the yellow-skinned man was reduced to a pile of ashes. "He killed Simpson," screamed a tall man with bull horns and a golden ring hanging on the nose. "You're dead, freak," shouted a third man with hair similar to iron wires before stabbing him in the back with a knife. Feeling the sound of bones breaking, the man grinned triumphantly, but when he pulled out the knife, he saw the blade gleam red before it melted instantly, missing the side glare that Izuku had sent to him. He didn't see the fist of Izuku wrapped in the chain that hit him in the face, throwing him against a wall, but his companions saw his face, or what remained of it, all too well, while the man was writhing on the ground in pain for having most of his face burned and destroyed at the same time. "You bastard!" shouted 2 of the remaining opponents, both perfectly identical, but while the first had some iron blades on his right arm, the other had them on his left arm, and both of them tried to behead Izuku, but, having heard them coming, he turned to them and grabbed the blades closer to him with his bare hands, blocking their attack. Just when he was about to melt their blades, the bullman charged him from the side, managing to hit Izuku with his head, and throw him against a pile of crates, destroying them all. "That was really close," breathed one of the twins, looking at the blade that had been grasped, noticing how it had been deformed by the heat. His brother was about to answer him when a violent explosion made the whole structure tremble, and slammed the remaining 5 villains to the ground. One of them, who seemed to be made entirely of mud and rocks, was the first to recover, and when he saw the origin of the explosion, he could not hold back a cry of fear when he saw Izuku walking towards them without even a scratch on him. "Damn monster," he shouted before jumping on him, spreading his entire body up to block the entire body of Izuku into a bowl of mud. "Good job, Rocky," exulted the bullman. "Now kill him," and his words died in his throat when he saw the whole bowl of mud turn black, as if it were made of burned wood. A moment later, what was once his comrade was shattered, showing Izuku with his flames still alive. "Just I already," shouted the twins, trying again to attack him, but this time he did not try to grab their blades, but slightly puffed his chest, as if he had just breathed in the air. When they were both close enough, he blew a large amount of fire out of his mouth. Neither of them had time to scream before being reduced to ashes. Looking up from the remains of the twins, Izuku noticed that the last 2 villains were no longer in sight, but, feeling a slight but audible click to his right, he turned his head in that direction, finding himself face to face with the barrel of an AK-47 held by the bowman. The weapon was visibly small for him, but it did not stop him from pulling the trigger while screaming "die." Before the first bullet could reach him, Izuku opened his mouth and stood in that position until the last bullet had left the magazine. In the silence that followed, the bullman could only press the trigger of the now empty rifle, with fear vivid in his eyes, as Izuku slowly closed his mouth. A second later, he tilted his head back slightly before throwing up all the bullets swallowed together with flames in the villain's face. The bullman could only scream for a moment before the bullets and flames tore his head to pieces, killing him in a few seconds. Ignoring the lifeless body of the villain, Izuku looked away and then pointed to a spot on the other side of the warehouse U. At that moment, the last villain became visible, showing his naked body, since he had freed himself of his clothes guilty. "No. Stay away from me. Stay away." shouted the man trying to run away from Izuku, but the young boy had other plans in mind, and, with a quick movement of his arm, lashed his chain like a whip, managing to hit the man behind his right knee, causing him to fall ruinously to the ground. Seeing him on the ground screaming in pain, Izuku walked towards him, preparing his chain, but a powerful male voice shouted behind him, catching his attention. "Stop where you are, crazy torch." Turning on himself, Izuku barely had time to see an iron brass knuckles before being hit in the face. The force behind the fist was such that he took a step backwards while turning his head. After a second necessary to keep the balance, Izuku returned to look at his assailant, ignoring his own jaw that had remained attached only on the right, hanging freely. In a few seconds he had a good view of the three newcomers, two of whom were looking at him with disbelief visible on their faces, while the third, the one who had punched him, was staring at him with narrowed eyes. The latter was a man with a muscular body, half his face covered with a black wraparound mask, and a pair of brass knuckles clearly visible on his fists. The other two, much less threatening, were a girl with pink hair wearing what could be called a succubus uniform, and a young boy wearing a black mask to cover his lower face, and, even in his current state of mind, Izuku could hardly believe it, an all-white-haired hooded jacket. Ignoring those three for a moment, Izuku put a hand on his dangling jaw, and, with a loud crack, put it back in place in a second. This surprised even more the two younger newcomers, while the one who had punched him seemed vaguely impressed. Raising one hand, he showed him his index finger and moved it to the right and to the left, slowly shaking his head and making a disapproving sound with his throat at each movement of his finger. After that, he turned to follow the wounded villain who was still trying to escape, but the man behind him put a hand on his shoulder. "It looks like you haven't yet grasped the concept, pretty torch," said the masked man, strengthening the grip. "I cannot let you kill that man." "Hey Knuckledister, is it wise?" asked the younger boy, looking at Izuku carefully. "He is." "I know who he is, Crawler," hissed the man with a low growl. "Precisely for this reason I cannot let him kill that man. Thanks to him, in the last year more and more people have begun to hate and repudiate the vigilantes like us, as if we did not have enough problems before." He then looked at the pink-haired girl. "Pop step, go and help that guy. Even if he deserves to be beaten up properly, this time only we will take him to the police. So you can also think with your mind and not just with your fists," said the girl with a little grin, missing the side glare of Izuku, before bending her legs slightly. Without putting too much strength, she jumped forward, almost touching the ceiling of the warehouse, but suddenly felt something wrap around her left ankle. In that brief instant of stalemate, she managed to look down, seeing Knuckledister and Crawler's shocked eyes, and the chain that had blocked her in Izuku's hand. Sensing his intentions, Crawler tried to stop Izuku, but he acted at that moment, and with a strong jerk of his arm, he crashed Pop Step into the ground, cracking the concrete floor with her body. While Crawler was paralyzed by the shock, Knuckledister seemed to be enraged, and with one hand, he turned Izuku, and then tried to hit him again in the face, but this time Izuku dodged at the last second to avoid his fist, and attempted an attack on the belly of the man. The masked vigilante sidestepped, avoiding the flaming fist, and he managed to hit Izuku with a left hook, this time sending him several yards away. "Crawler. I know." Without hesitating for a moment, Crawler put both hands on the ground, and then activated his quirk, shooting forward with incredible speed, aiming to hit Izuku, who was already getting up, albeit slowly. His high-speed front kick was however blocked by the hand of Izuku, shocking Crawler with his strength and accuracy in predicting his attack. Looking at the young vigilante, Izuku growled and then lifted him, still holding Crawler by the foot, before slamming him against the ground, knocking the air out of his lungs. Feeling heavy steps, Izuku looked at Knuckledister, who was running toward him, and tried to hit him with the lash of his chain. The older vigilante seemed to anticipate his attack and took a step back, but the length of the chain was still sufficient to reach him, opening a deep cut from the left jaw up to between the eyebrows. Cursing out loud because of the pain, the man did not miss the chance to grab the chain with both hands. "I won't let you get away with this." Growling again, Izuku jerked the chain, managing to drag the man towards him. Surprised by his physical strength, Knuckledister couldn't block Izuku's left hand, which grabbed his face before slamming him against the ground. Seeing all three vigilantes on the ground, wounded and in pain but alive, Izuku looked around for the last villain, then noticing a trail of blood leading to the secondary exit of the warehouse. Leaving the three vigilantes behind, Izuku followed the trail. "I cannot feel my back," groaned Crawler in a low tone. "Well, try to feel it again. We have to stop that walking torch," said Knuckledister, trying to stop the bleeding from his wound with a hand. Near them, Pop Step managed to get on her knees, though with difficulty. We have to hurry up, or that man is as good as dead. Outside the warehouse, Izuku had found the wounded man again. The villain was still crawling in search of safety, and had arrived in a huge open space with warehouses on the right and the sea on the left, with several fishing boats docked. Without wasting any further time, Izuku advanced toward him, but suddenly, something jumped out of the sea, creating a large column of water before landing not far from him. If Izuku had had his eyes, he would have narrowed them at the sight of someone far more dangerous than the vigilantes or the already dead villains, because a few meters away from him, there was a tall man dressed in a plain white suit with armor on his chest and forearms, as well as an orca mask that also served as a cape. Gang Orca, current number 10 in the pro hero ranking, looked at him with his large eyes surrounded by many red rings. So you are that flaming centaur that everyone talks about. He took a step forward, assuming a fighting pose. You have been unlucky to find yourself in this area with me on patrol. Your trail of victims ends here and now. Without any warning, Gang Orca rushed forward with a speed unthinkable for a man of his size, and hit Izuku in the chest with a fist, knocking him against the wall of a warehouse, creating a crater in the metal surface. Completely unharmed by the attack, Izuku jumped on the ground roaring to his new opponent, and hurled his chain against Gang Orca. But the hero grabbed it without problems, and proceeded to pull Izuku to him with a strong tug. When he was close enough, Gang Orca made a very loud noise, similar to an orca sound, that crackled the surrounding ground, knocking Izuku to the ground. Believing he knocked him out with that last attack, Gang Orca approached Izuku, but at the last moment he saw him rise with the flames around his skull more violent and strong than before. With a roar, Izuku ran to him and tried to hit his opponent with a fist that was intercepted by a fist of Gang Orca. The impact generated a strong shock wave, and further cracks formed in the ground, but neither gave way. On the contrary, both tried to hit each other again, and achieved the same result. After the second shot, Izuku tried again to attack him with the chain, but Gang Orca avoided it and grabbed Izuku by the collar of his jacket, and then projected him back first to the ground with all his strength, creating a deformation in the ground. The hero then raised a fist to hit him, but Izuku spat a large amount of flames from his mouth, striking point-blank Gang Orca, who was forced to let him go to extinguish the flames. With a growl, the hero grabbed a bottle of water attached to his waist and spilled its contents on his head, so as to hydrate his body again. In the meantime, Izuku had got up again and, after a short crossing of glares, he blew another cone of flames, while Gang Orca attacked again with his sound attack. Flames and sound collided, generating a violent explosion that made the whole area tremble. When his attack ended, Gang Orca could not help but notice how the temperature around him had risen dangerously. TCH, it's like when I spar with Endeavor. Their flames are definitely too hot for me. If this fight goes on much longer, I will lose for sure, thought Gang Orca, before looking at the seat behind Izuku. Perhaps this will work. When Izuku took a step forward, Gang Orca ran to meet him as fast as he could, and hit him with his shoulder, sending him fly into a fishing boat that swayed dangerously due to the impact. Not at all damaged by the attack, Izuku burned what was left of the cabin, just in time to see Gang Orca crashing into him, with both hands closed like a mallet. The power of the blow that followed broke the boat in two, slowly making it sink, and sent Izuku to the bottom of the bay. Gang Orca followed him easily, being able to swim freely like an orca, and when he saw him, he noticed that the flames had dimmed but not completely. Grasping him again by the lapel of his jacket, the hero hit Izuku with his sound attack, and, since the sounds traveled faster in the water, the effect was even more devastating, destroying part of the seabed and shaking the sea above them. Having no problem staying underwater for a few minutes, Gang Orca let the sand raised by his attack settle again, and when it did, he saw that the flames had completely died out, leaving only a skeleton. Now, since there wasn't a heart, there could not be a heartbeat. However, he noticed the fact that the skeleton was not falling apart like a normal skeleton, but for some reason it remained all in one piece. He must have lost consciousness or something like that, thought Gang Orca, preparing to swim to the surface, but two skeletal hands suddenly grabbed his wrists. Caught off guard, he looked back at the skeleton, only to be blinded by the flames that flared up again, as a voice screamed surprise. After that simple word, Gang Orca felt the temperature of the water rise more and more until it boiled, and his screams were easily overwhelmed by the inhuman roar of Izuku. The three vigilantes managed to arrive in the open space after recovering from the beating just suffered, but looking around they saw no one. What the hell happened here? Shouted Knuckledister, looking at the devastation caused by Izuku and Gang Orca. Someone must have decided to face Flaming Centaur. And I think they did not hold back, said Pop Step with bandages around her head. Guys, why is the sea boiling? Asked Crawler, and when the other two noticed that detail, a violent explosion threw a number of boats into the air, causing them to crash into the ground, or even into the nearby warehouses. But what caught their attention was the person thrown into the sky along with the boats that crashed not far from them. In a few seconds the smoke cleared, and Crawler paled to see Gang Orca on the ground, with his chest exposed and covered with burns as well as his arms, the worst around his wrists. What the Knuckledister was interrupted when someone else jumped out of the water, landing near a destroyed boat. The three vigilantes immediately prepared for a new fight at the side of Izuku, but he ignored them, intent on observing Gang Orca, as he stood up with difficulty. Looking down, Izuku saw a large chain with an anchor sticking to it, and, without any difficulty, began to spin the chain over his head, making it spin faster and faster. Pop Step looked a bit confused. What is he doing? He wants to throw the anchor on that hero. Gang Orca, move away, shouted Crawler, preparing to use his quirk, but at that moment, as expected, Izuku threw the anchor with all the chain on Gang Orca. The hero, having heard Crawler's screams, knew what was coming, but his legs did not respond to his commands, so he did the only thing that came to mind and raised his left arm to catch the anchor. When his hand was able to grasp the large iron bullet, his entire body was pushed backwards for several meters, digging 2 furrows in the cement with his feet. However, in the silence of the night, the three vigilantes could distinctly hear the blood-curdling noise of Gang Orca's bones breaking in his arm. Without saying a word, the hero dropped the anchor to the ground as his arm fell helplessly along his body, showing large black bruises where his bones had broken. Izuku looked at him for a few seconds, thinking that the battle was over, but then he saw Gang Orca advancing towards him with blood dripping from his mouth and wounds. "What's the problem, Flaming Centaur?" asked Gang Orca, staring at him without fear. "I'm still here." Izuku snarled at him but decided nevertheless to put an end to that fight, so he took with one hand the chain, not caring that the anchor was behind Orca Gang. Izuku had something else in mind. When they were within fist's reach, Gang Orca tried to hit him first, but Izuku lowered himself and punched the hero in the stomach, causing him to vomit blood mixed with saliva. However, taking advantage of Izuku's position, Gang Orca hit him using his hand like a blade from above, managing to break his left collarbone, but it seemed not to disturb Izuku, who hit him again in the stomach, making him finally fall to his knees. Now ready to finish the fight, Izuku turned to the right and saw the three vigilantes running towards him, but with a movement of his hand a wall of flames rose from the ground, blocking their advance. Focusing again on Gang Orca, Izuku was hit by a sound attack, but this was weaker than the others, and Izuku managed to counter it with a roar, creating even more flames around him, before wrapping the chain around Gang Orca's neck. Gang Orca widened his eyes as Izuku began to tighten the grip with the chain, trying to strangle him. The hero grabbed the chain with his only good arm, trying to loosen his grip, but he knew immediately that there was no way to prevail against the strength of Izuku, especially in his conditions, so Gang Orca grabbed his flaming skull, ignoring the flames that burned his skin, and began to tighten more and more, opening some cracks in the bones. Izuku ignored Gang Orca's vain attempt to stop him and put more pressure around his neck. The hero did the same, trying to destroy his skull. But with the passing of the seconds his strength left him, and finally his hand fell helpless along his body, while his eyes closed slowly, with the image of a flaming skull burned into his mind. It was at that moment that something seemed to snap inside Izuku. The flames around him seemed to fade, and the grip on the chain became weaker, letting Gang Orca fall to the ground. Behind the wall of fire, the three vigilantes saw Izuku raise the hands in front of his face, before looking at the downed form of the hero. "What I have done," Izuku whispered before roaring toward the sky with new flames dancing around him. "Hey, what's going on with him?" asked Pop Step, frightened by the sudden roar. "I don't know, but we need to set Knuckledister," before noticing the wounded villain behind some crates, while trying to get away after miraculously succeeding in avoiding the fight. Unfortunately for him, Knuckledister was not the only one to notice his retreating form. "You?" Trembling upon hearing that voice, the man turned for a moment and saw Izuku focused exclusively on him. That gave him the energy he needed to limp faster, but Izuku had now reached the limit of his patience. Seeing an underwater rifle among the remains of a wrecked boat, Izuku took it with his right hand, and then aimed at the man's back. "What is he doing? That rifle has no darts," said Crawler with confused eyes, but then, much to their horror, the underwater rifle was enveloped in flames, changing shape, and assuming a more demonic appearance with the end of the barrel, that had assumed the shape of a skull. Before they could scream anything, Izuku pulled the trigger, and a dart made entirely of flames darted through the air, hitting the wounded man in the middle of his back. He didn't even have the time to scream that his whole body was reduced to ashes. The three vigilantes had no idea what to do now that the villain was dead, but Gang Orca was still on the ground, too close to Izuku for their tastes, but all three of them were forced to jump to the side, to avoid being hit by Izuku's motorcycle, that passed easily in the middle of the wall of flames, dissipating it. They saw the bike stop near Izuku, who put his new weapon in a holster just created on the side of his flaming vehicle. Knuckledister gritted his teeth, getting up. "What are you?" Seeing that Izuku had ignored him, mounting on his bike, he shouted, "What the hell are you?" After a few seconds of silence, Izuku turned his head towards them, thus showing the cracks in his skull that were already closing up. The last of them went from his left socket down to his jaw and, closing up, seemed to follow the trace of a tear. "I don't know." Those words seemed to stun the three vigilantes, who could only watch as Izuku drove his bike away from them, fading into the darkness of the night. Then flashback. All Might remained silent, carefully watching the young boy sitting on the ground a few yards away from him. During his story, Izuku had transformed into his human form, and as the story progressed, the hero had seen different emotions on his face, mainly shame, anger and fear. "Now I remember. When I was not in town, I received a call from the government. Apparently Gang Orca had been hospitalized and his condition was critical. Multiple fractures throughout the body, third-degree burns on the chest and arms, head injury, damaged throat and so on. They told me that maybe his career was over, but he recovered within a few months, and continued with his job as a pro hero. But since that day he has always avoided the port," said All Might, while looking at the sky. "So it was you." "Yes. Do you understand now why I cannot be a hero, All Might? I have no right to be a hero. For 2 years I killed villains, or sent them into a coma. I almost killed one of the best heroes in Japan, and I also wounded those vigilantes who wanted to stop me from killing," said Izuku, looking down. "How can I even hope to become a hero when my own quirk seems to have been created to kill? That's why I do not want to be a hero. The heroes rescue people and imprison the villains, while I ignore the innocent and kill the criminals." For a few seconds, the two remained silent. All Might, despite his past experiences, did not know what to say. He knew that Izuku was basically right. After all, he had fought a hero, risking to kill him, but, surprisingly, Gang Orca had not held him responsible, saying that it was he who attacked Izuku first, and the three vigilantes had said the same. So, as regards that particular episode, Izuku had acted in self-defense. However, this could not erase the trail of death he had left behind. "This is troublesome," murmured the blonde hero. "Technically you are not labeled as a criminal, but as a vigilante." "I know," nodded Izuku without looking at him. "How?" "Certain data are classified and not public." This time Izuku looked at him with a little smile. "We have a mutual friend, the detective Namasa Tsukauchi. He is one of the 3 people who knows the whole story. The others are you and my guardian." All Might was genuinely surprised. "He is aware of your quirk? Then why?" "When he was still a policeman, he took me to the hospital during the day of the terrorist attack, and from then on he became a family friend. When I told him the whole story, he proposed to take me to the police station to be able to file the case of Flaming Centaur as an isolated case of loss of control, but Johnny opposed him, and in the end they both promised to keep my identity a secret. So I would like to ask you not to get angry with him for not telling you. I know you're both great friends," explained Izuku, earning a loud sigh from All Might. All right, I will not tell him anything," said the hero, returning to the initial topic. "You are not a villain. Not officially, at least, even if I fear that many people call you that, but you know, not by chance. There are unofficial rankings managed by fans." Izuku arched an eyebrow. "You mean like the looks most like a villain ranking?" "Indeed. There are dozens of heroes in the world who are not welcome, but in spite of this, they are heroes who never hurt anyone innocent, more or less. Endeavor is a clear example. Although he's the number 2, he is not well seen by civilians," explained All Might. "The same could be said of you, in a sense. You are trying to master your quirk to avoid killing again. That is a behavior that can only be associated to a hero or a vigilante, who is extremely loyal to his vocation of doing justice on his own without killing anyone. Today, while the other heroes were undecided on what to do, you acted to save that student. Probably, if I had not intervened, you would have burned that slime with your flames. But the fact remains that you have acted, not them. A person who doesn't want to be a hero wouldn't have moved a finger." Izuku looked at the ground again. "Even if it were as you say, my face is well known. Thanks to Namasa, the police never come to investigate in my area. But if I were to become a hero, the situation could get worse, and I do not want Johnny to be affected because of me." All Might couldn't help but show a little grin. See? Even if you do not realize it, you think of others and their safety, but you have a point here. After 2 years of activity, all the heroes are aware of your existence, and practically all the civilians have heard something about you, so a possible career as a hero is definitely full of difficulties. But what would you do if I told you that there is a way around this problem? Seeing the confused look on Izuku's face, All Might added, "Kid, there is a way for you to become a hero. When I stopped you after the accident with the slime, I wanted to talk to you because I saw something more than a simple hero in you, and, now that I know your whole story, I am even more convinced of my choice. You wanted to be a hero, and now you have a huge power inside of you, but just because of that power, you decided to give up your dream, trying to control your quirk, when other people, in your place, would have used that power to gain fame in a short time, not caring for the victims on their way. Yours is a behavior worthy of a hero." All Might stood up, dusting his pants. "Kid, there is something I have to tell you and it's important, but first I want to see your determination to follow your dreams. There is a famous beach that has become a dump not far from here. In 2 days, at 6 in the morning, get there if you still want to become a hero. I could have a solution for you and your problem." And with that, he left, leaving behind a confused Izuku who could only watch the sky. The determination to follow my dreams, huh? Not far from the building site, All Might started a call from his cell phone. After a few seconds, someone answered. "Nezu. It's me. I need to ask you a favor." Dump Beach, 2 days later. All Might was sitting on a refrigerator, looking absently at his cell phone. 6 o'clock in the morning and no trace of Izuku. He sighed slightly. Maybe the quirk has really conditioned him not to become a hero. Such a shame, he seemed more than suitable to become. He was interrupted by the roar of an engine not far away, and, turning slightly, he smiled as he saw Izuku park his bike before reaching him. "Glad to see you here, young Midoriya," said All Might using his family name. "You said you could have a solution for my problem. I wanted to know what it was," said Izuku looking at his idol. "I do not want to become a hero, All Might. My past would not allow me to enjoy my life if I could succeed in becoming one. This could be true, but it happens that I can give you a second chance," said All Might, confusing Izuku. "You've probably already heard of the UA High School, the prestigious academy for heroes. Difficult not to know it when it is not far from my house," said Izuku with a nod. "Good. You must know that its principal is a dear friend of mine. I explained some things to him the other day, and before you get agitated, I just told him I know Flaming Centaur. He does not know anything about Izuku Midoriya, your guardian or your contract," explained All Might. "I asked him for a favor, that is, that you could enroll in his academy so as to become a hero." Izuku widened his eyes in surprise. "What? But I do not want to become a hero. And how can I go to Japan's most prestigious academy when I'm labeled as a vigilante? Before exposing my idea, I have to explain something about me. Young Midoriya, what do you think my quirk is?" asked All Might with a serious look. Izuku raised an eyebrow, while holding his chin with a hand. "Well, I have followed your main website for many years, and among all the ideas that the fans have exposed, something like enhanced body or super strength remain the most likely solutions." "They're both wrong," said All Might with a calm voice. "My quirk is not something so simple. It is the quirk to transfer your own power to another person, and it's known as One for All." "One for All?" repeated Izuku, looking at his idol with a mix of awe and confusion. "Yes. You see, the man who gave you your quirk was right. There are different ways to get a quirk. I, just like you, was quirkless, but then, the one who became my teacher decided to transfer into me One for All, a quirk that allows the owner to use his stockpiled power in his or her body, and to transfer this quirk to someone else," explained All Might. "Right now, I am the 8th owner of One for All, and for years I have sought a worthy successor who could inherit this quirk from me, and here is where you come into play, young Midoriya." "Me?" shouted Izuku with wide eyes, not expecting something like that. "Yes. As I said, you have shown to me that you have the heart of a true hero. I have seen many talents during my hero career, but few have lived up to my expectations, and none of them has ever shown that spark needed to convince me, until I met you, a young boy with an enormous power, but willing to give up his dream in order not to harm someone who is innocent," said All Might, opening his arms. "Young Midoriya, despite your past, the horrors you saw, the pain you suffered, the sacrifices you made, your heart never stopped beating for justice. I know hundreds of people who would have fallen into the darkness if they got a power like yours, but you did not. You resisted the darkness within you and tried to control it. For what? To help people in need. And that, young Midoriya." All Might jumped down, changing into his hero form before crushing the fridge with one hand, showing the rising sun. That's what a hero would do, a real hero. Not driven by success, by money, by fame, but by the need to help. All Might shouted at Izuku now. As I have already told you, you have shown that you have the heart of a hero, but your mind does not allow you to accept it, because of your quirk. In you I see the perfect successor for One for All, but I'm sure that, right now, you would never accept such power, and that's why I want to help you with your current quirk. You want to help me? Asked Izuku with surprised eyes. Of course. You are not in danger, but you still need help to master your power, and helping a person in need is what the heroes do. Shouted All Might before returning to his skinny form. Young Midoriya, I cannot force you to do anything. I could never do something like that, but I still want to help you, and if I'm not enough, UA High School is the best academy for a reason, and there are teachers on purpose to teach you how to master your quirk. Izuku looked at him for a couple of seconds. Several emotions passed through his face, but in the end he asked a simple question: why? All Might seemed surprised by the question. Why what? Why are you doing all this for me? I know heroes always help people in need, but I'm just an ordinary boy. There are God only knows how many people out there that the other day would have acted just like me, probably all worthy of your power. Said Izuku with confusion in his eyes. As far as my power is extremely dangerous, there are other people out there who may need your help. So why me? After a moment of silence, All Might sighed. I will not lie to you, the reason why I feel compelled to help you, besides seeing a successor for One for All, is that you remind me of myself when I was your age. As I said, I was quirkless, but the woman who became my teacher saw something in me and helped me get stronger, so that I became what I wanted. The symbol of peace. Izuku looked into his eyes, noting the seriousness behind every single word All Might had just spoken. Sighing, he shook his head. All Might, I cannot inherit that power. You can say the opposite, but I'm not worthy. I cannot become the new symbol of peace or something like that. Not after what happened. I'm sorry. I see. Murmured All Might with a sigh. Well, I won't force you to change your mind, but my proposal to help you remains valid. The entrance exam will be held in 10 months, and by then I am sure we will have made some progress. You talk about it, as if I wanted to take part in that exam. Noted Izuku with a raised eyebrow. I know what you think about it, but you have to know that every year the judges of that exam are all heroes, many of whom work at UA as teachers. The principal will put a good word to let you in, and you can show them, as well as to the other examinees, that you are not a monster like they believe. Explained All Might, raising a finger at every point. The judges look at everything during the exam, and, whether you pass it or not, they will report what they have seen to the other heroes, and if you make a good impression, I am sure that the public opinion about you will change. At least you will show them that you are willing to help by trying to become a hero. It's a win-win situation for you. Izuku seemed to think about it. Indeed, the situation was very advantageous for him. All Might would help him master his quirk. He still could not believe it, and during the exam, he could show that he was not just a killer, even if he failed the exam. No, I will fail the exam. Despite All Might's words, I cannot ignore what I did. I will treasure his teachings, but I will deliberately fail the exam. After all, it is just about destroying robots from what I have heard. I'll just destroy a few of them so that I will not be admitted with my score. Thought Izuku with a nod before looking at his idol. I accept. All Might grinned at him. Very well, in this case it will be better to roll up your sleeves. We have 10 long months ahead of us. Johnny's house, 10 months later, day of the entrance exam. You could always become a model for some stylist or painter. Said Johnny looking at Izuku, who interrupted his breakfast to glare at him. Hey, you always need to have a plan B, no? And your body would be perfect for that role. I already imagine the hosts of girls ready to jump at you as soon as you leave home. Izuku shook his head with a sigh. Unfortunately, Johnny was right. During the last few months, Izuku had trained day after day with All Might to improve his body and the control over his quirk. Both had given excellent results, perhaps a little too much, seeing that now Izuku had a physique worthy of a professional swimmer, if not even better, while the control over his quirk was almost perfect. Unfortunately, he was not yet able to block it at night when the evil reached certain levels, but in the last 10 months he had killed only a dozen people. Excellent results, without any doubt. Sighing again, he put the dirty dishes in the sink and went to prepare his uniform for the exam. A simple combination of black leather jacket and trousers with an inverted U on the chest, and the addition of his favorite red shoes and a pair of black fingerless gloves. Placing the uniform in the backpack, Izuku could not help but feel nervous. Since that night when he had transformed for the first time, he had always tried to keep his identity secret. He did not know how people would react to his flaming appearance, so it was better to have an emergency plan. Therefore, on the spot, he placed a black mask over his face that covered from the nose down, and a sleeveless hoodie to put under his jacket, with the hood lowered on the face. After a brief inventory, Izuku closed his backpack and left the house saying goodbye to Johnny and his mother's photo before mounting on his bike. With a violent roar, the engine started and Izuku led the bike toward the UA High School. Parking the motorbike near the entrance, he seemed to attract many incredulous looks, probably due to his means of transport. Right, practically all of them are younger than me, so they do not have a driver's license yet, thought Izuku looking around. Hey, out of the way, shouted an all too familiar voice behind him, move away or do you want to die? Bakugo, murmured Izuku seeing the blonde walk towards the entrance, forcing other people to move, even though many of those present recognized Bakugo because of the incident with the slime. Fortunately, that day Izuku had not been seen by the cameras. Shaking his head, he took a step forward when someone slammed against him from behind, surprising him. Ow? I'm sorry, said a female voice. I wasn't looking. Looking back, he saw a brown-haired girl with eyes of the same color as she rubbed her nose, apologizing at the same time. No need to apologize, nothing happened, said Izuku with a little smile hidden by his mask. Are you here for the entrance exam too? Oh yeah, said the girl with a nod. Sorry again for the trouble, but I was definitely nervous, and I did not see you before thinking, and this speaks volumes of how much I am nervous. He is quite tall. I see. Well, the opening ceremony is about to start, so it will be better to enter. Good luck for the exam, said Izuku with a nod before walking inside the building. Following the crowd, he reached a huge hall with hundreds of seats. Sitting in one of the central rows, Izuku half closed his eyes, waiting for the beginning, which arrived too soon. And far too loudly. Welcome everyone to my live show, shouted a man with sunglasses and blonde hair. Now I will give you a quick explanation of how this exam will take place. Are you ready? So President Mick works here too. I guess all the teachers in this school are pro heroes, thought Izuku listening to the rules, but then, a guy with glasses stood up saying that, on a handout, 4 types of villains were indicated, and not 3 as President Mick had just said. Then he turned to Izuku. Moreover, what's with you? Yeah, you, curly-haired boy, said the black-haired boy pointing at him. I saw you coming with a bike before, and that means you're older than us, but you're taking part in the exam. Does it mean that you have been rejected once and you still want to take part in the exam? If you think this school is a way to pass the time, then you should withdraw immediately. Izuku glared at him without speaking. You're lucky I'm not here to cause problems, or you'd be already on the ground with your hair completely burned. After that little incident, President Mick explained the last rules of the test, including the enemies that were worth 0 points, after which all the examinees were accompanied inside of the changing rooms where they could wear their uniforms and equipment, before being divided on several buses that brought them near their assigned site, which looked like a small town. Looks like everyone is quite calm, thought Izuku, making sure the mask and the hood were covering his face well. Looking around, he saw the girl who had bumped into him shortly before, intent on taking deep breaths. Well, maybe not everyone. I see what your intentions are. You're trying to figure out who has the worst concentration among us, is not it? I would like to know who you are. You're not here to obstruct our exam, are you? I already told you, just because you lost a year you do not have to think about being advantaged or favored in this exam, said the bespectacled boy from before with a glare, while the people close to them began to murmur, saying that Izuku, being someone who had lost a year, did not have to be very strong, therefore one less rival in the exam. So they think they are lucky to have me as an opponent, huh? Thought Izuku with a sigh. Well, time to show them why they're wrong. And in a matter of seconds, he was engulfed in flames, which burned his flesh and skin, leaving only a flaming skeleton who, after lowering his mask and hood, looked at the now pale boy in front of him. Without thinking, he whistled with 2 fingers between his teeth, and, in a few seconds, all the examinees could hear the roar of an engine approaching the gate from which they had just arrived. Much to their horror and fear, they saw a flaming bike approaching their group, forcing them to move, before stopping next to Izuku, who mounted on his bike with surgical calm before looking back at his opponents. Do you still think you are lucky to have me as an opponent? Asked Izuku, and no one had the courage to answer him until the bespectacled boy could stutter flaming centaur. In the bones. Nodded Izuku before hearing the voice of President Mick shouting, and start. While everyone else stood back to look at the tower from which President Mick had screamed, Izuku accelerated toward the center of the city, grabbing his underwater rifle he had acquired during his fight with Gang Orca. Firing 3 darts of fire, he destroyed 3 robots worth a point, and then moved on to the robots that were worth more. But in a few moments he was reached by the other examinees, forcing him to stop for a moment at 22 points. I'd say that this is enough. Now I just have to look for a place to wait. It would be better to go to less crowded areas, thought Izuku looking around, but then he spotted a robot destroyed but not irreparably. Not having anything better to do, he approached the robot, starting to study its engine. Chamber of Judges, at the same time. So, that's the infamous flaming centaur? Asked a voice looking at his screen. He does not seem so dangerous. To his right, another hero snorted. Go read what he did to Gang Orca, and then we'll talk about it. Wait. Is he studying that robot's engine? Does he know he's only 4 minutes left? Asked an amused female voice while, sitting on the left, a strange white animal looked at All Might in his skinny form. Are you sure about this, Toshinori? Yes. Nodded the blonde hero looking at the screen showing Izuku. I'm sure his hero spirit will surface during this exam. Well, the time is almost up, so it's time to start the real test. Said another hero before pressing a red button, triggering a small series of explosions in the center of the fake city. Fake city, Izuku's exam site, shortly before. A powerful sneeze sounded in the air, and Izuku inadvertently spat a fireball that melted the robot he was studying. Damn it. Someone is talking about me somewhere. Though Izuku with a low growl, I bet it's Johnny. His thoughts were abruptly interrupted by a series of explosions not far away, and, before he could understand what was happening, he found himself in the shadow of something very big. Looking over his shoulder, he saw a huge robot intent on destroying a building with one hand, and present mixed words came back to him. That thing is the 0-point villain. Thought Izuku looking at the devastation caused by the robot when dozens of examiners ran past him, trying to get as far away as possible from the giant gimmick. They certainly know how to scare people. Better to follow the crowd since destroying that robot does not make any sense as it is worth 0 points. But after mounting on his motorcycle, he heard a faint moan of pain behind him. Looking back, he saw the brown-haired girl from before on the ground with one foot blocked by some rubble. Why is she not using her quirk? From what I've seen, she can undo the gravity of the object she touches. Thought Izuku, then noticing the sick color of her face. Is she sick? No. Before the exam she was fine. It must be a side effect of her quirk. Looking absently at the other examinees, Izuku saw that none of them had noticed the girl in trouble, and that they were all running away, including that odious bespectacled boy. His hands tightened slowly on the handlebars of his motorcycle, which seemed to react to his emotions, emitting a noise like a demonic snarl from the engine. They want to become heroes, but at the sight of a villain stronger than others they run away like cowards, and nobody tries to help that girl. Izuku thought, with his flames slowly melting the asphalt around him. Pathetic. Feeling the ground shake, Izuku returned his attention to the robot that was advancing towards him, probably to chase the fugitives, but on its way there was the girl still stuck. With a loud snort, he turned the bike and headed for the girl, grabbing the chain he held around his chest. When he was close enough, Izuku whipped his chain and hit the debris that were blocking the girl, freeing her instantly. Before she could figure out what had happened, he let go of his chain, which wrapped around his chest again, and grabbed her by the collar of her sweatshirt with his free hand. Whatever happens, do not use your quirk, he shouted before placing the girl on the saddle of his bike, which accelerated by itself, moving away from the robot that had already raised a hand to crush them. Well, time to get to work, Izuku said to himself before being crushed by the enormous hand of the robot. The impact made the ground tremble, raising a huge cloud of smoke, but that did not deceive the robot. To be precise, it didn't deceive the different sensors placed in its body, as well as the thermal vision implemented in its eyes, and the data it was receiving were, in human terms, definitely alarming. Before the robot could react, its right hand exploded in a ball of fire that consumed its arm up to the middle of the forearm. Quickly lifting what was left of its limb to contain the damage, the robot did not notice a chain stuck in the circuits of the arm, and, when it had completely raised the arm, Izuku was practically thrown into the air above the robot. Letting go of the chain so as not to break it, Izuku adjusted his position in mid-air and looked down, precisely at the robot's head. When his ascending motion ended, Izuku began to fall toward the robot, creating a large amount of flames that formed a spiral around his right arm. If he still had lips, Izuku probably would have grinned at the idea he had in mind. During the 10 months of training with All Might, the hero had explained some things about One for All and the attacks that he and some of his predecessors had created. Izuku had not inherited the quirk, but that had not prevented him to take inspiration for a personal attack. His own personal way to thank the hero for his help. When the impact with the robot's head was imminent, Izuku charged his right arm backwards, focusing all the flames in his fist. When Izuku was a few inches from his target, he hit the robot with all his strength, shouting, "Hell smash." Upon impact, Izuku released all of his flames inside the robot, whose body quickly changed from dark green to brilliant white, before being destroyed by a series of violent explosions from the inside, with a final explosion that disintegrated it completely. But by then Izuku had already jumped down, landing without problems on the ground, creating several cracks around him. As what was left of the robot fell to the ground, Izuku heard the roar of his bike coming closer. Looking in that direction, he saw it with the girl still on the saddle, and, if possible, her face had become even greener than before. With a low chuckle, he walked toward the bike until he stood beside it, ignoring President Mick's voice as he screamed that time was up. "Looks like it's really over," said Izuku before stepping aside to allow the girl to run behind a piece of cement and throw up her breakfast, and who knows what else. Shaking his head, Izuku adjusted his mask and HUD before returning to his human form. Approaching the girl who had just finished throwing up, he put a hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" The girl looked at him in confusion before nodding slowly. "Yeah. Thanks for saving me." Air. Flaming Centaur." Izuku chuckled a bit. "If you want to call me like that. Now that the exam is over, you should go to some doctor, better be sure." And with that, we walked toward his bike before hearing, "I'm sorry." Looking back at the girl, he arched an eyebrow. "What?" "I'm sorry. If it was not for me, you could have accumulated more points," said the girl with a worried face, but Izuku waved his hand while shaking his head. "No problem. I'm not angry, and failing this exam will not change my life, so you do not have to worry," explained the young boy before mounting on his bike. "If you will be admitted, good luck with your career." Before she could say anything else, Izuku put his hands on the handlebars of the bike and left a few moments later, while many of the examinees were coming to the scene to see what had happened. Approaching the gate from which he had arrived, he could not hold back another sneeze. "Damn it. I wonder who is talking about me. If it's still Johnny, this is the right time to burn his chopper's wheels," thought Izuku without being able to know that, in a room at the UA, a series of heroes were intent on cheering with wide smiles on their lips, especially All Might. Johnny's house, 2 days later. Izuku was intent on arranging the drive chain of his Kawasaki, when the garage door suddenly opened, and a grinning Johnny appeared before him, holding a white envelope between 2 fingers. "There's a letter for you, from the UA High School," said Johnny, handing the envelope to Izuku. "I wonder what it could be. Probably a thank you letter for participating in their exam or something like that," guessed Izuku, catching the letter before walking toward his room. His bike was perfect now, so he could go take a shower, but first he wanted at least to see what was written in the letter. "All Might has not contacted me during these days. He is probably not happy with my performance during the exam. I hope he is not offended," thought Izuku before opening the envelope, finding, in addition to a sheet of paper, a strange metal disc. That small object fell on his desk, and a holographic screen materialized in front of him, with a close-up, maybe too close, of All Might, who was smiling at the camera. "Am I on screen?" shouted the man as the camera moved away. To show the hero in full, it took some time to jump through some hoops and get this done, so for not able to contact you sooner. "That's my bad." After a bow, he looked back at the camera. "I guess we'll be seeing a lot more of each other, since it's been decided that I'll work at the UA. He'll be a teacher," thought Izuku before sweat dropping, since All Might was talking about post-production with the operator of the camera. "Back to the main topic. You behaved very well during the practical test, but with a score of only 22 points, you have obviously failed the exam," said All Might with a serious voice. Izuku sighed, being aware of that fact, but hearing someone like All Might say it was not pleasant. But wait, there's more. Confused by those words, Izuku looked at the holographic screen as All Might showed another screen at his side. On that screen appeared the brown-haired girl that Izuku had saved from the giant robot. Excuse me, hi. As soon as the exam ended, this little lady petitioned us directly." "Why?" you ask. "Here's why. Sorry to bother you, but do you know the boy with the mask, the hoodie and the motorbike?" I mean, Flaming Centaur." The girl asked President Mick, who was in front of her. "That's me. No surprise here," thought Izuku with a raised eyebrow, not understanding why All Might was showing this to him. "Would it be possible to share some of my points with him?" she asked, shocking Izuku to the core. "Wait a minute. He saved me and failed to earn more points. Oh no. Don't tell me. Please, at least give him the points he lost because of me." No. Much more so than any Quirk. said All Might, looking again at the camera. It was your actions that touched the hearts of the judges. He then crossed his forearms in front of him, and they were looking at more than just smashing some robots for points. Having now guessed the meaning of the exam, Izuku was more than slightly pale. Did you think there would be an academy for heroes that rejects an entrant for doing the right thing? Perish the thought. He smiled even more at the camera. Think it's cheesy? Fine by me. It's in the job description. Laying your life on the line to do cheesy stuff. All Might pointed at another screen showing a ranking with 3 columns. Name of the examinee, villain points and rescue points. Izuku paled even more in seeing his name at the top of the ranking, with 22 villain points and 60 rescue points, for a total of 82 points. Congratulations, young Midoriya. You pass, said All Might with a nod and the ever-present smile on his face. From now on, UA will be your hero academia. And with that, the projector went off by itself. After a full minute of silence, Izuku slammed the head on his desk with a loud groan. This is not possible. So, said an amused voice at his left. Izuku sighed, glared at the intruder, his guardian Johnny, who was looking at him with a little grin, and 2 bottles in his hands, champagne to celebrate your entry to the UA's sake. For the same reason, only in a negative way. Izuku glared at him for several seconds. I'll burn the wheels of your customized Harley Davidson panhead. Johnny paled instantly. You would not dare. Izuku said nothing and went to the bathroom. Izuku, answer me. You wouldn't dare, right? Right. Izuku. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. The possibilities were truly mind-blowing. If you found this video entertaining, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-if stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious.